Man, reversing samples, I think, is probably one of the most underrated like techniques just for getting a completely different sound out of the same material.
And we're on. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Last Week Liquid podcast. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Aden, better known as Artsea. Aden is a drum and bass producer based out of Melbourne, Australia, with releases across the likes of Future Retro, Goldfat and 174. He is also the label manager at 174, as well as the content and product manager at EDM Prod, a platform dedicated to teaching electronic music production. You can catch his latest release, Path to Never and Finding Solace, out now on Differential. Aden, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing not too bad, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's funny you ask how I'm going. It's like literally 5 minutes before I jumped on this call with you. We just found out that Victoria, the state in Australia I live in, is going into lockdown for the 6th time.
Jesus.
So it's kind of a bit of a bummer, to be honest. But like I was meant to go out for dinner tonight, and it's like from 8 p.m. tonight where we're locked down. So yeah, just processing that, I think, at the moment. Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
man.
So I definitely don't want to linger on too much on COVID and
totally.
Because when I started this podcast, it was like a year ago, and that was like the hot topic. Yeah. And I feel like a year on, it's still kind of the hot topic, and I'm just like a lot of people just sick of it. But just regarding like what you're going through now, so it's lockdown, as in you can't get out of your house after a certain hour, or.
I think the rules are, I mean, I haven't actually like fully looked into it yet. My wife called me just before and was like, oh, like, by the way, this happened. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So as far as because I wasn't even checking the news or anything. As far as I'm aware, like what's the last like 5 lockdowns we've had have been is there's only 4 reasons to leave home. So it's like shopping for groceries, like 1 hour of exercise, like essential work, and like carers or hospital or something like that. So it's like, yeah, pretty much indoors apart from those things. And so a bit frustrating having to, we were just coming out of another one and the restrictions were easing. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah.
Jesus. We're going to switch topics quickly, but it just feels like it's never ending. And I know it's very divisive, especially in the UK at the moment, because they've opened up clubs and everything. And you can see a lot of people were like, okay, get tested, but also enjoy it and go party like you deserve it. And a lot of people were like, yeah, this is not the moment to go out. We should still be staying inside. And I could, depending on the day, I could kind of understand both opinions, although I lean more on I lean a bit more on the, okay, at some point we do have to get on with our lives. But I do also understand the point of view of other people with like, I don't know, new variants and like still needing to be cautious. How
Totally. I'm probably a similar, like I've traditionally been like, I get it. We have to, stay safe and we have to, stop spreading it. But at what point does it, it's like, at what point does it become like too long in lockdown? And now I'm kind of like, I'm empathizing more with the people who have been like wanting to just move on with it. And I'm feeling that more myself now, if I'm honest, like, and I think that's what's happened in the UK as well, from what it looks like over here. Like more and more, the longer it, like the UK had a longer lockdown overall as well. Like we have had more, but like one of them was longer. A lot of them have been shorter. So I totally get why people feel that. Yeah. 100%. Crazy.
Yeah, it's fucking depressing.
Sorry to start the episode on this.
No, it's fine.
We'll get on to lighter things.
Yeah, it's just it's even when you're like with friends or stuff, it's like, okay, let's not talk about COVID, but it's so embedded in everything that you do, your everyday life, like going to restaurants, bars. It's like I tried to stop thinking about it. At some point I was going like a very negative rabbit hole of reading too much stuff online, and I was like really trying to take a step back and not think about it. But then you're always reminded of it wherever you go. You see signs and you see messages and stuff, so it's hard to pull out of it. But we'll try and do that for the next hour. Just forget that COVID is happening.
Yeah.
So So yeah, let's just start off with your latest release on Differential. As we're recording this, it'll be coming out tomorrow, I guess. But it'll be out for a couple of weeks when people will be listening to this. Yeah, so first of all, congrats, Differential. I love that label.
Thank you, man.
They've been putting out great music, the great type of liquid melodic stuff I love to listen to. How did those two tracks kind of come together, and how did they land on Differential?
Yeah, so it was actually funny because I sent the tunes to Queer and Lenners about, it was probably like 15, 16 months ago now. I was just chatting to him one day, and at that point, like, I've been producing for a very long time, but I've kind of gone in and out of drum and bass. And if you actually go back far enough in my catalog on Spotify, you can actually see I was making like not drum and bass under my current name still. So it's like a bit of a weird decision in hindsight for me to do that. But
I've heard some future lo-fi and future beats and stuff like that. We can get into that later on.
Yeah, totally. So to be honest, I've only, like, my first like drum and bass release, I self-released a track, I think January 2020, right before COVID hit. And then my first label release was on Shadow Hearts 2020 April. So I've only been releasing drum and bass for about the last year and a half, like officially under the name, and committed to that direction. And that's like where I'm heading in, like, for the foreseeable forever at the moment, which is what I love. It's like kind of taking this full circle home and experimenting with other genres. But yeah, so for Differential, I was kind of in that like stage of just putting feelers out there to a lot of different people and labels, and I was like kind of struggling to get tunes that would connect with certain people, and my production was also probably improving a lot at the same time too. So I kind of sent a few tunes to Lenners, and he was like, yeah, man, these are really sick. Like, we were just chatting on Facebook Messenger. And he was like, yeah, man, I'm going to send these off to the other crew. And it was actually a very long process of A&R with them, which I'm kind of actually quite grateful for in hindsight, because what I had experienced with them rather than a lot of other labels is that they were very committed to giving me feedback, and not just one round of feedback, but multiple rounds of feedback. And as a result, my tunes improved a lot, and I can apply that to other tunes now. So it's like, it was a lot of rounds of feedback to go through, and it was over a long period of time, but it was very worthwhile. And I'm very thankful for them for doing all that. And yeah, so then eventually we got to a point, a couple of tunes in there were going to come out and then weren't, and then back and forth. And then I sent them some new ones. So they were the two we ended up kind of settling on in the end. So it was a bit of a process, but very worthwhile. Yeah.
Was it ever frustrating, that rounds of feedback? Because it's always a fine line between, oh, feedback is great, I'm learning stuff, and kind of, what more do you want?
Totally. I mean, I give a lot of feedback on music for my job. So I'm kind of well acquainted with giving feedback. And one thing I also like is that they did both positive and constructive feedback. So it's like, these are the good things and these are the things you can improve. And I think having that balance of both of them made it better. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, everyone at some point probably is a bit frustrated with feedback, because they're like, oh, especially if it's like something that you deliberately did for that reason, and it's like a creative decision, and it's like, oh, or for example, two people are saying different things. I think there's always a little degree of frustration, but it's like definitely, I mean, at the end of the day with feedback, you kind of have to make a decision for yourself whether you're going to implement all of it or not, because some of it at the end of the day is purely creative. Some of it's more like mixed down and engineering, and it's like, yeah, your bass is too muddy, you probably should EQ it, or so yeah, I think overall it was a good experience, but yeah, always definitely moments in there for sure.
Yeah. Was there any of those creative feedbacks where you had to maybe push back and stand your ground as like, this is still my track and this is what I want to express?
It's funny. I feel like between the three of them. So it was Queer Eye, Niels, and Peter. All three of them kind of had like opposing feedback sometimes. So like if one person, depending on who gave the feedback first, like the other person would be like, I disagree with this person's feedback. Like, let's just it's kind of like, okay, who do I listen to here? And I'm like, then I just make the decision for myself. And it's like, you might be like, I don't really like the vocal here. And then this guy's like, no, the vocal's fine. Like, or like maybe just change this one part of it, but not the rest of it. And it's like, you kind of have to work through that a bit. But it was good.
No, it's a good label to be on. They're definitely on my like mental short list of labels I'd like to put out some tracks with, because
man,
there's I love obviously the music they put out, but also like the artwork they do is very they've kind of nailed their own identity in terms of artwork, which I always enjoy, like seeing a cover and being like, oh yeah, that's Differential, for example.
100%. And that's a great thing to do as a label, is to have some sort of consistent visual identity, whether it's just simply the types of graphics you're using or like whatever that is. It's good. I like it.
How involved or how important was the artwork for you in this case? Because I know in like your self-releases, for example, there's always kind of a like the rectangular, for example, like the image, there's always a consistency with the way you, even your Facebook posts, sometimes your pictures, there's like an effort behind it. It's not just like photos.
Sure.
How important was it in this case?
In this case, it was, when I release with a label in general, unless it's kind of like my own label with 174, I kind of just let them decide, because I know that their visual identity is probably something that like represents the label, and you know, I'm sending a specific sound to the label that aligns with that already, and so I know that the artwork will kind of, to a degree, represent that. I mean, in this particular case, they just sent it to me, and I was like, "This is sick. I love it." Like, there was nothing for me to say, and I was like, "Yeah, great." I was actually on holidays recently, and that's when they sent it to me. So I was a couple of days late, and I'm like, "Oh wow, like yeah, no, let's roll with this. Like, this looks awesome." So. Very rarely will I, unless there's a very particular reason, and I have done this in the past, unless there's a very particular reason, there's something I don't like about the artwork, I'm pretty chill with it. Like I'm not fussy.
No, I think it's just important to have, like, to be able to, from a label point of view, and you definitely do that with 174, to be able to identify a label before you read any words. Just like the first impression is like, oh yeah, that's this label.
Totally.
Sometimes it takes time to achieve, obviously, but it's really important. Just want to jump into another track of yours, which I was dying to talk about because I absolutely love it. And we talked about it on one of the recent rundown episodes, which I do with my co-host Artsea. Every 2 weeks we run down the news and releases in drum and bass that kind of stood out to us. And a few weeks back you put out your track Longing as a like free download. I was like, how the hell is this a free download? But anyway, okay. And you know, like sometimes like you listen to a lot of drum and bass and it's all good, it's nice, it's fine, and then you'll have one track from time to time that just kind of jumps out, and that's like really special. That was Longing for me. Like it really kind of stood out for some reason. I'm
glad, man. No, I appreciate that. It was a very fun track to make, and I do have a lot of attachment to that particular tune because it was kind of one of the ideas that started simmering when I first took my music in the drum and bass direction, and it went through a lot of changes over like the last 2 years really, and then no label was actually really interested in it, funnily enough. So actually it was one of the ones that was going to be considered for the Differential release. Like there was just like some of them liked it, some of them didn't like it, and it was just kind of a decision, like, okay, we'll just have to like cut our losses with this one and focus on the other tunes that we all agree on. And I was like, that's fine, you know. So I was like, but I still want to put this out. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really a strong tune. And while I was on our episode when we were talking about it, and I was telling my co-host, for me, like the thing that really hit home was actually when you posted about it on Facebook or Instagram, and you had this like a short video, like this old cartoon that went with the tune, black and white, and like the two of them together just like evoked something in me, like I guess longing, nostalgia, something.
Yeah.
And it really just like really stuck with me. Like now when I listen back to the tune, I think back to that little cartoon. Like how did you pick that? Was just random or?
One thing I've been trying to do with releases is like kind of, especially for social media, I think this is important, is having some sort of visual pairing, I guess you could say, between the song. And even though there's artwork and stuff like that, and then, you know, certain labels will have some sort of visuals that go along with their artwork, but I think a lot of people and potential fans out there like seeing visuals along with music, and I think that's why people have always liked music videos, right? And I think what happened with this particular tune is, I've been thinking about that a lot more, and I'm like, well, when I post this on Instagram, I want to be able to post more than just like a like picture of the artwork and a link,
or just a waveform or something.
And I've been really interested in thinking about like, what is my visual identity as an artist, and I think I'm still kind of figuring that out, because I'm kind of experimenting with it at the moment, and it's difficult to establish, especially when you're releasing on different labels, because a lot of different labels have their own visual identities. But yeah, with this particular one, like the cartoon graphics, I actually found public domain. They're actually public domain, like loops essentially, or like animations from like the 40s.
Okay,
And basically, I just found sections of them that I liked, and I found that with that tune in particular, that it just really kind of suited the vibe of it for some reason. And I've always been interested in those kind of old school cartoons, like the old Mickey Mouse.
Exactly.
It's just a certain type of nostalgia. I mean, not that I was even alive around then, but I've always liked that kind of aesthetic for some reason.
There's something like I've talked about it with other guests, like nostalgia for periods where you weren't even alive. It's like this strange thing of like I have a big nostalgia for like the Oasis period of like early 90s. I was just born at that time, so it's like I don't really feel nostalgia in the sense that I lived through it, but still in some sense.
Totally. I see that. Like, for example, even places like I've never been, like I've actually was meant to go to the UK last year for the first time. That didn't happen for something we won't talk about. But like I've always felt like an attachment to the UK for some reason. Like I've always appreciated like UK like comedy, like the obviously the music for me as well is a big part of it. Very much attached to that. I mean, part of Australian culture is very heavily influenced by British culture too. So there's definitely a connection there. Even though I've never visited, I definitely feel like an attachment to certain places as well.
Almost feels like longing could be like a reflection for that feeling, like longing for the UK or something like that.
Totally. In an indirect way, it kind of is, because it was kind of a, like a marrying up of like me going back and rediscovering all these amazing drum and bass tunes that I liked from that period in my life around 2011, 2012, like when I really started getting into drum and bass. And it was kind of, almost a reflection on that period, and then like me kind of just making a tune around it, I guess. So definitely, man.
No, it's a brilliant track. And just to close it off on that one, while I was listening to it, I had strong like Moby vibes for some reason. Through the vocal chops especially that you used. I don't know if that was just me in my mind, or does that ring true to you? I don't know.
Who was I talking to about this the other day? I was talking about Moby to somebody. I can't remember where. It might have been a friend on Zoom the other night or something like that. I can't remember, but it was actually my friend John, who's actually started producing recently, and we're talking about Moby, and like he was probably one of the first introduction. He was like my first introduction into electronic music when I was younger. My dad used to play his albums from like the late 90s. So I think Moby's approach to music is like definitely like this underlying influence in everything I do, just like sampling, just the way he like it, and like keeping things musical as well. Like it's definitely probably not directly trying to copy that in that case, but yeah, definitely an underlying musical influence. Like there were these like kind of like this, it was this soulful kind of hook. I think it might have even been a splice sample originally that I like did some weird processing to and pitched parts and reverb and did some weird stuff and kind of created this new phrase out of it, and then reversed part of it for the like response section. And so maybe similar kind of approach as well to production.
It's funny that your dad used to listen to Moby when you were young, and then I hear Moby in that track. Like somehow it, like I couldn't really pinpoint my finger. I felt like it was the vocal, but now that you talk about more the arrangement and reversing samples, I know Moby's big on just reversing big like string sections, for example, and creating a brand new melody out of it.
That was which tune did he do that on again?
I forget, but there's these breakdown videos on YouTube of like how people sample different things, and it's I don't know if you saw the one on Daft Punk, One More Time.
I think I have seen that one. Yeah,
they show like the original samples, and then the parts that are chopped up and what they did to it. It's fascinating.
Because it's one more time is it's like is it that the Chaka Khan sample? I think it was.
I forget the name. It's like disco stuff.
I think it was that one. Yeah, and it's that intro section just looped, and it's so simple, but it works so well. That's the power of sampling. I mean, I love sampling. So
and it's especially on that track, like Daft Punk One More Time. It sounds like, if you didn't know, obviously it was what it became. It sounds very like amateur in terms of how it's sampled, because it's very like cut and start, like doom, and then it starts again. Like it's very, but somehow it just works so well.
It doesn't even really sound like if you're listening to it and not really knowing where it comes from, it almost doesn't really sound like a horn section. Like I think that's where it's sampled from, with all the other instruments in the background too, but it kind of takes on its own sound when you sample it in that way. Like just the way it's cut or whatever.
The one with Moby, I can still see like they play the string section. I forget which song it is, but they play like the entire string section from the original, and you're like, okay, I've never heard of this. And then they flip it, and you're like, wow, okay, now I recognize it.
Oh man, reversing samples, I think, is probably one of the most underrated like techniques, just for getting a completely different sound out of the same material. I love reversing stuff. It's great.
Actually, that was that's a good segue into your recent podcast you did for EDM Prod, the EDM Prodcast. Love the name.
Yes.
Where you had I forget the name of the guest. I'm not too much.
Tizoki.
Tizoki,
He's like a kind of trap dubstep producer. Living in the US.
I'm bringing it up because I think I was listening to it, and you talked about he talked about like reversing samples. That sometimes like that's like all you need. Like you don't need to be like super complicated. Like just reverse it and it works.
Like I love doing that with pianos, and vocals are a great one as well. It's a fun way to work. And I love audio manipulation in general as well. Like I think that's just an underrated way. Like there's only so much I feel like you can do a lot with like adding effects on a channel, like reverbs, delays, distortions, etc. But like those like audio manipulation, like chopping, reversing, I feel like that's such a fun way to work for me. And yeah, definitely good stuff.
There's one big thing I took away from that episode was the way he explained he worked visually, in terms of like you can do a lot of sound design and intricate sounds within your synth, but then in your project it's just going to be like 1 or 2 lines, and that doesn't, at least for him, it doesn't tell any story to him because it's just a line. Whereas if you either use samples or bounce it to audio, then you'll actually see like a swell before a drop or something, and that can spark like new ideas. I thought that was really insightful and never thought about it like that.
Yeah, and I do the same with my drums. I know a lot of people get mad at me for I work like pretty much predominantly now in audio for drums. Even working with one shots and stuff. Like it's just for me quicker, and I can get a vibe and an idea down a lot faster than like dragging it into the MIDI clip and drawing in the MIDI. For me, I just much prefer to work like that for drums. So yeah.
I thought that was the way most, at least in drum and bass, most people went about it. I thought it was always like dragging samples.
So too. Yeah, I think I feel like more people I've found like than I thought this would happen to do use MIDI. I mean, I get using MIDI for certain things, like hi-hats are sometimes fun to use MIDI with because you can like drag 5 or so hat samples into a drum rack and then kind of play them around and create some cool patterns that way. You know, like kicks and snares. It's like, I personally much prefer to work visually. And then even if I do work in MIDI, sometimes it's nice to just bounce it out to audio. Then anyway, you've like kind of created a little loop there, so may as well bounce it to audio and work from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Coming back to that podcast, how was that experience hosting I think it was your first podcast of that series, the first time you were hosting.
So, it's been a long running podcast. I think, because I listened to that podcast like back in the day as just a listener. Like I think it started in 2015, so it's been around for 6 years on and off, and it's had 2 previous hosts. And I'm the third host of the podcast, and it's kind of a surreal experience when you've been listening to it for a very long time, and then like even this now, like me listening to your podcasts, it's like really cool to come on the other end of things and actually be speaking on it. Like it's kind of a nice full circle moment, to be honest, when you appreciate something already. And so it was kind of the first time. His interview wasn't actually the first one I recorded. Funnily enough, it was the second. Okay. The first one I recorded was actually the one that's going out tonight, which is I did one with Umek, who's like a techno producer. He's like always in the Beatport charts.
He's huge.
Yeah, he's pretty big. He was my first interview, so I was like hella nervous because I was like, this guy's like been around for 28 years. You know, he's like very well known. Like runs his own label. He
launched a crypto like in 2017 during the whole mania. I don't know if you asked him about it.
And that he's been involved kind of with the NFT thing a bit, I think now. Yeah. So, like we didn't actually talk about that specifically on the podcast because he also co-founded like an music analytics company called Vibrate, which does like Beatport analytics and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I mean, anyway, back to your original question. It was a good experience, and I've recorded a few episodes now, and I'm sure you found this, is that you just get like so many different perspectives that you can apply to your own music, and you learn a lot that you just wouldn't even expect to learn. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and trying to, obviously it's a bit more of a general electronic music podcast. It's not just drum and bass, but trying to sneak a few drum and bass artists in there, trying to line up a few. So we'll definitely see hopefully some people in there soon, but I love it, man. It's really good.
Yeah. Did you kind of offer to do it, or did the team ask you to do it? How did that happen?
Yeah, so EDM Prod's a very small team. So it's basically just me, my boss Sam, who's amazing to work with. Just such an awesome guy. Like it's a very chill work environment. We had a guy working for us previously. So Sam used to host it first. He hosted it for about the first 100 episodes, and then just decided like he wanted to hand it over because it was, as you know, recording and editing a podcast, it can be a lot sometimes.
Yeah.
So then we had another guy, Connor, who did it for about 50 or so episodes, and then he left to he now works in data science, so he left EDM Prod, and now I've been there for about 2.5 years now, and I kind of always wanted to, but we'd had like on and off moments with the podcast, and like I was focused on other things and didn't really have time to do it anyway. So then eventually it was like we decided, okay, we do need to bring this back. It's a good thing to do. And then I was like, yep, happy to do it. We also this time wanted to do video interviews, which is something we hadn't done before. So we like do a normal podcast, but then there's also like a video version on the YouTube channel. So it's something I've been wanting to do for a while, and pretty stoked to be doing now. Yeah.
No, it's such a. Obviously, I host my own podcast. It's such a cool format. I love podcasting, and I remember actually, I think you posted about it somewhere, and so I checked out the podcast, and then I realized I had listened to it in the past.
Nice.
I had listened to the Willem episode a while back.
I actually linked that one up with Connor, who was hosting at the time.
Okay,
because Willem had just toured in Australia. Right before COVID hit, with like BC and a few other people, and I hung out with him for a bit, and he showed us some production stuff. I'm like, yeah, man, we have a podcast, you should come on, and that's how that kind of came about. So that was like super helpful when I had him on my show, like to listen back to that episode and kind of prep some questions, and just like part of the research I do on my guests. Like if they go on a podcast, that's like gold mine because they talk about a lot of stuff. And I can just kind of bring in some new info or perspectives to my own questions. So that was great. I listened to a few of them. I'd say the only thing for me with that podcast is because, as you said, it's EDM. It's a lot of different genres. And so most of them, I probably wouldn't have heard of the guests. Totally.
And so that's the only thing where I won't tune into every episode because very often I don't know the guest. And that was kind of one of the like reasons when I started, where I was like, okay, I'm just from my experience, that's why I'm going to focus just on drum and bass artists.
Totally.
Obviously we talk about other topics once we're on the show. It's not like we're talking just about drum and bass, but that's like the starting point. It's just a different approach, I guess.
Totally. And I think these days, like if we're starting it from scratch, we're actually talking about this literally earlier today, me and Sam, like not necessarily just with the podcast, but I think these days, like there's a lot more genre specific stuff going on, and EDM's not like some people kind of disagree on this. I kind of take the approach that EDM is just an umbrella term for like, I think of it as all electronic music. Some people think of it as just kind of commercial electronic music. But it's not really one specific genre. And, I think there's a lot more specialization these days, and I think that's great. Like, I think, like that, there's whole genres like drum and bass is a perfect example that have whole communities built around them. And while I guess we play a more generalized role in interviewing a whole host of different genre artists and industry experts, like one person I had on the other day, which it was like a amazing, very humbled opportunity, was Steve Duda, and who made Serum. That's
pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. And like, he's someone who he says is like, he's involved indirectly, like with the creation of so many different genres. So in that way, it's kind of cool to be involved in a lot of different genres. And I mean, I get a lot of stuff out of it that I can apply to drum and bass and whatnot. So it's great.
The other thing you do also is I'm sure you do a ton of other stuff for EDM Prod, but your video like tutorials on YouTube. It's often focused around like tips and tricks regarding certain topics. Can you tell me a bit about like the recent videos that you did? Maybe like what were in your mind, maybe like the most important tips that you've given out on that channel?
I mean, recently I made a video last week on like stereo imaging and like the whole, just thinking about stereo in a mix. I feel like this was an area I neglected for a very long time, and I feel like very easily misunderstood because it's like controlling, getting the stereo image right, because everyone just thinks of like levels in terms of like this needs to be louder, this needs to be quieter. It's like, well, it's not always that simple because this sound may have a lot of stereo width, which makes it seem louder than what it actually is. And there's a lot of apparent loudness kind of in there. So I did a 5 stereo imaging tips, and it basically just kind of stepped through the way I like to think about stereo. And it's like, okay, this is the mid and side channel. If you're a producer out there listening to this podcast, I think like it's very important to understand like mid-side channels. And like one thing I do now is when I'm referencing a tune that I like is I actually reference the mids and the sides of that tune, so I can hear what have they done from a mixing and probably mastering perspective to make the stereo image what it is. And I can hear that if I solo the side channel, I'm like, oh, okay, they've got this pad is very wide, and the hi-hats and crashes are very wide, and in the center it's like very consistent. So that's like what you want, right? And also then like how loud are the sides in comparison to the mid versus my track and that kind of thing. So referencing things in terms of that has been like, yeah, really changed and like helped me from an engineering perspective, level up my mix downs and stuff like that. And just like mono compatibility, like how to add stereo width in different ways. Like a lot of plugins and effects out there are adding stereo width to sounds like not even, and you don't even know it. Like reverb is adding stereo width in your mix. Like certain types of delay are adding stereo width in your mix choruses. And yeah, I guess just being very intentional and then controlling it. Like if you're using a sample that's already got a lot of stereo information in it, maybe you want to like turn that stereo information down a bit by bringing the side channel. So yeah, that's kind of one area I've been very interested in recently. So if you're kind of beyond that like beginner phase of production, and you kind of understand a bit about like general leveling and EQing and compression, I think stereo image is like the next kind of big mix down topic to tackle. It's a bit of a beast. Yeah.
I feel like you're speaking directly to me because I never do anything with like, I'll pen a few hats and that's about it.
It's like, you know, you can make a great tune without really giving a lot of consideration, but it's like, you know, you listen to, I was like referencing a break tune the other day, and I'm like, why am I setting myself up for like just disappointment? Because it's break.
Don't do it.
It's just like, it's just not. I was mastering one of our 174 releases, and I was just like, man, this is just, break's probably the hardest act to follow, I would say. Maybe behind Noisier, I don't know. In terms of drum and bass, like in terms of like, he just has such insane mix down quality and master quality. And so yeah, it was definitely something I noticed about his tunes was just the stereo image was very balanced and very deliberately controlled. Like where he had like very strong mono in the low end and very tight top end. Yeah, it was just amazing.
Yeah, I feel definitely stereo imaging is like the last, like when we talk about mix downs, it's often levels, frequencies, and then penning. Those are like, if those are the 3 main things that you need to control and do properly. Levels and frequencies are very straightforward. Like if an element is louder or not, EQing, same stuff. If there's way too much info in the low end, that's gonna come through directly. But imaging is like a lot more subtle in that sense. Like it doesn't jump out as directly unless you collapse it to mono or stuff like that. So it's like you have to make more of a conscious effort, I think, to learn about it.
Yeah, and a good example is like if you listen to a good like foghorn tune, like the drum, like a lot of the drums, maybe in the top, besides the tops, will be like pretty down the center with a bit of stereo image in there. But like, you know, you have like the first part of the drop, it's pretty like empty, and then this big foghorn just comes in. It's just like, not only is it really loud and compressed in general, so it just comes out of nowhere, and it's like doing a bass face right now if you're listening. But then it's also like this with certain types of foghorns anyway, this massive amount of stereo information just comes out of nowhere. And it's just like that also creates like this extra apparent loudness. And that's kind of like what makes it interesting to listen to as well. And that's just sometimes as simple as like adding a chorus in before some distortion or whatever you're doing in terms of signal processing. But yeah, like those kind of things, it like creates a lot of apparent loudness and stuff like that. So it's definitely, I would say probably not as important as the other three things you mentioned, but yeah, if you're like wanting to take things to the next level, it's a good area to kind of conquer.
Yeah, no, definitely. Actually, just talking about loudness, another video you made was on silence, which I thought was fascinating. How did that topic come about? Because it's not like a natural topic to kind of talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of mentioned this earlier. Like I give a lot of feedback on a lot of like students we have for EDM Prod. And one thing I see a lot of newer producers kind of do is they feel they need to fill in every single gap in their mixes, because it's like that's what you're doing as a producer, is essentially you're filling up silence with sound. But the assumption for a lot of people is that every little gap has to have something kind of important. And it's like, actually, how can I use the absence of sound as a musical tool, and leave a gap here rhythmically, like a rest is what the traditional music term would be. But a rest or a silence, like at the beginning of the drop where you're expecting a big bass sound to come in. It's like those little things you like create not only a sense of like making the track more interesting, but also just a sense of like dynamics. Like everything is either between like maximum loudness or minimum loudness. And I think like you can kind of have things come out of nowhere that way. And it's like, well, if you're trying to create like say a punchy kick drum, it's like the way it's punchy is because it comes from absolutely nothing to absolute maximum. It's like you can plug it to anything in the production process. It's like if you have a bass sound that is right before it's like pure silence, it's just like going to have so much more impact when it hits. So I think not having to fill every gap is super important. And I think it's a struggle every up and coming producer goes through, and especially if you're in the more like us, in the more liquid side of things, is how do you keep it melodic and interesting but simple at the same time, because you don't want to be throwing 15 different sounds into your track, because then it's not going to make sense. Exactly. And liquid, you have a lot more ambience and pads and stuff like that, so it's not like you have to have like 0 dB. You may have like a reverb tail here and there, but like I think I maybe mentioned it in that video, I can't remember now, but there's like different types of silence. There's like pure silence, there's like kind of you get the noise tail, or like the reverb tail echoing out between the gaps, like between the kicks and snare, and having just general dynamics, maybe automating the pad with a filter a bit more so that it kind of quietens down in certain sections. And it's very easy just to fill out with so much space, so many elements, but sometimes it's nice to strip things back.
And I guess it just comes with time of like having the confidence of not needing to put something in every bar, like to have that confidence of, okay, I'm just gonna leave this one pad playing for a few seconds. Like that's it takes time to achieve, I think, that level. I'm not there yet.
Totally. Like I think it's an earlier Halogenics tune. Oh, what was the name of it? It was out on Critical. I can't remember the name of the tune. I'm just going to quickly search it now before I forget. But the main kind of pad is just like this one here, Her Waves by Halogenics. Yeah, it came out 2014, so it was a bit earlier. The main pad is just like this kind of chord sample, and he just like pitches it, like plays 3 different pitches, and it like has this echo, like long release, say. And that's like the main hook in the track. and there's other things, the vocal that comes in, and there's obviously some bass in there, like sub bass, but like the fact that it kind of echoes out and it like leaves space for it to ring out is what creates the vibe of the track for me. If it had more elements in there, it probably wouldn't feel the same. So yeah,
no, definitely. Yeah, that was like super interesting video for me, because I had thought about like obviously the concept of not trying to fill everything, but the way you kind of used silence in like turnarounds, for example, and things like that. I was like, oh yeah, that actually makes the turnaround more interesting than putting a new sample or a new bass line or something, like just actually removing stuff. That's enough. even in Liquid, like a lot of people just remove the last bar of like a 16-bar phrase, and that's enough sometimes to create that like anticipation before the next section. Yeah, absolutely. Just before we carry on, is there any chance you have a light in your room or something?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'll quickly check it on.
Perfect. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't anticipate the fact that it was gonna get dark.
Yeah, no, it's fine. What time is it?
It's nearly 6 p.m. here.
Oh, it's winter. Oh no, you're in winter. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's definitely dark.
do you get like a rough winter in Melbourne, or is it a Australian winter?
I mean, Melbourne and Tasmania are probably like the coldest winters. I mean, like, yeah, because you use Celsius in Ireland, right? Yeah, cool. So it like on like a really cold day in the morning, it might get down to like 3. Okay. But like that's probably like an extreme. Like it never snows in Melbourne. It's kind of like if you go into the mountains a bit, it snows. Like I was actually at the snow on holidays recently, so it's not as cold as the UK from my understanding anyway. Like, but in terms of Australia, like where I'm from, which is Brisbane, which is like in Queensland, so it's like much more kind of in the like up on the coast of Australia. It's just like hot all year round. Like even in the lowest part of winter, it's lucky to get down to like 12 or 15 on like the worst day. And the rest of the year, it's max 30 pretty much the whole time, which sounds nice if you're from a cold climate. But I can promise you, like if you live there, like not only the high temperature, but combined with the humidity, like you do kind of get sick of, I find. Yeah.
Is it the kind of like humidity where you like take your shower in the morning and then you step outside and 5 minutes later you're sweating like crazy and there's nothing you can do about it?
That's I would sum it up exactly like that. Exactly. Yeah.
It sounds exactly like my experience in Hong Kong was exactly like that. Like the coldest month would be in like maybe January. You'd get down to 10, 12 degrees, maybe for like a few days. And the rest of the year is like around 25 to 30. But like the opposite of like 25, 30 in Belgium, where I'm from, is like quite dry. And so it's a pleasant 25, 30 degrees. Whereas Hong Kong
I'd say that's similar in Melbourne. Yeah.
Whereas what you just explained, like just going out and just sweating straight away, that was my experience in Hong Kong for like 6 to 8 months per year. It's like crazy.
Totally. I'd take 30 in Melbourne over 30 in Brisbane any day. Like it's just a different heat. Like 30 in Melbourne, you can go outside and kind of like lie in the sun and it's nice to be outside. Yeah. And I do get moving down here why people like summer, because it's like, oh, it's actually warm and it's not uncomfortable to be outside. Like it's actually pleasant. And it does get hot sometimes in Melbourne. Like it can get up to 40 on like a heat wave or whatever. So it definitely has the extremes. Melbourne's known for its like 4 seasons in one day, so it can change a lot here too. Yeah.
What I know you moved there recently, like a few years ago.
It was early 2019, so 2.5 years ago.
What kind of sparked your move to Melbourne?
I think, to be honest, it was probably I'd been down here a few times just visiting, and it was just like Melbourne's got like much bigger kind of music scene. It's like the cultural capital of Australia sort of thing. So there's a lot more happening in terms of that. I love Brisbane, but I mean, one, the weather was a big deterrent for me. I actually really like the colder climates. But yeah, two, probably the music, and also three, just like it just has a nice vibe about it. It's just a nice place to be. Like it's like yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just I just like the vibe of it. It's hard to explain. Yeah. So that's and I love Australia. I love living in Australia. So I mean, I wasn't planning on moving overseas anytime soon. I'm like, well, if there's anywhere in Australia I'd want to live, it's here. So yeah, and just like good to like get out of your hometown. And I'd been in Brisbane my entire life. So
yeah,
I mean, I lived in Melbourne for like 3 years when I was a kid, but I don't really remember it at all. So yeah,
maybe that's the longing aspect we're talking about. Longing. To
yeah,
go back
yeah.
to. If we're getting really deep.
Yeah, it probably has some like maybe there's like some subconscious influence.
Yeah,
because I lived here as a kid, maybe. But yeah, nah, it's a good place. I love it here.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think it's important to find a place where you feel like you fit in and you feel like it's your place and kind of like your people. Like the way you talk about it is very culturally aware and stuff like that. So.
Totally, yeah. Made great friends here down in music and other places, like even just like the church I go to, like the people I go and visit, the cafe, they're always friendly. Like everyone like I've met down here is just really, really friendly. So yeah.
I'd love to visit one day. I'd love to visit.
Yeah.
I went to I was in Sydney for a week back in like 2015 or something. I had a friend living there. And I loved Sydney. I absolutely loved it. It's
a nice place to be as well. Like it's a nice metropolitan area. Yeah.
Would it be like much bigger than Melbourne, for example, or?
It's like slightly bigger by like a couple 100,000 people.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the difference between Melbourne and Sydney is that Sydney's kind of like it's not the capital either, but it's like the biggest city, and it's kind of where everyone goes for like work opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, people come to Melbourne for work opportunities a lot of the time too, but it's definitely more of it's a lot more chill here, I find, in comparison to Sydney. Sydney's like everyone's hectic, doing stuff, so it's like more business oriented, I guess you could say. Yeah.
It's funny you say Sydney was hectic because I was. The reason I was visiting, I was doing a exchange student program in Taiwan.
Oh, nice.
Which Taiwan is like Taipei, the capital, is proper hectic. And so when I visited my friend in Sydney, I was like, this is so chilled. Like the vibe is so calm and it's quiet and everything compared to Taiwan.
I was catching up with a guy last night. He's actually a drum and bass producer as well. And he basically said he lived in London for like a lot of his life, and he said coming to Melbourne and even like Australia just in general is a lot more chill. In comparison to somewhere like London. I've had a lot of people who said the same thing, and it makes sense. It's just a bigger city, probably a lot more going on than Australia. Australia is still a pretty small country, even though it's a massive land size in comparison to somewhere like the UK or America. It's just a lot more spread out. Like I remember Sydney getting there, and it's like the avenues are bigger, and it's not as tall. It's just more like widespread. We were like, we've got so much land. we can just go anywhere we want. Yeah. You drive past like there's this big open field, and you're like, what's here? It's like, oh, they just haven't done anything here yet. And it's oh, that wouldn't happen in like I don't know another city. It's like
anywhere in Europe, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's cool. I still want to talk a bit about, if it's cool with you, just kind of your upbringing in music, because you mentioned a few times that you came back to drum and bass and you were producing other genres, and you had this great Facebook post recently with some pictures of you kind of retracing your history in music, which I thought was like really well done. And again, there was like this consistency in the way you posted the pictures. They were all framed like a similar way. And so, kind of like walk me through how you got into music production, how you discovered drum and bass, came back to it, all that stuff.
Totally. Just give me 2 seconds. My dog just wants to leave the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry, he was clawing at me to get out. I think he needed to go do something. Sorry. So yeah, my background in music. Yeah. So yeah, that post was kind of a nice reflection on, like just the journey I'd taken, and I also think like I mean, everyone's journey is different with music and where they end up, and I feel like I'd taken a very confusing journey. Like it was confusing for me. Like I'd made so many different genres, had so many different projects, and it was just kind of for me like a not admitting, but like reflecting on like what I had done and where I'd been and like who it had made me as a producer today. And yeah, like, so like to give you kind of a slightly longer version, but not too long. It's like, yeah, no, sweet. Basically, yeah, I've been involved in music. Like I grew up listening to a lot of music. My parents used to play heaps of different music when I was a kid, whenever we'd be driving. Like listen to a lot of kind of 80s and 90s music as well, that like very much what my parents listened to. Like Moby was a good example, like lots of that kind of stuff. I'm a big Coldplay fan as well, like really like their music. So yeah, I'd always been like loved listening to music. Slowly got into electronic music. I actually played trumpet from when I was about, I think like 10 or so. I played that for like 7 or 8 years. So that was my first instrument. It's not a very versatile instrument. So unfortunately I kind of like didn't keep going with it. Because one, you can't play chords, and two, it's not even tuned like a normal piano is. Like a C on a trumpet is like a B flat.
Oh, really?
On a piano. Yeah, so it's what's called a B flat instrument. So it's like the notation, if you play like sheet music, if you play a C, it's like, oh no, that's a B flat.
Why?
So I don't know. Some guy many years ago probably decided, like, I think it's to do with the way it's like the pipes are organized.
Yeah.
And like when you're playing like the default notes, it's tuned to a B flat, like instead of a C.
Yeah.
Like it's just a weird.
So how do you play along with other people?
Well, when you're in like a band, you kind of have to transpose everything up 2 semitones every time. Like, okay, we're in this key of C. Okay, I'm gonna play a D. It's like, yeah, it's a bit of a pain. So that was another reason it wasn't very versatile. Yeah, I mean, saxophone's worse. It's like E flat. So it's a few instruments like that. Yeah,
I had no idea.
Yeah. So it's just the default tuning is like that for some reason. Yeah. So I kind of didn't traditionally learn any other instruments. I kind of started teaching myself piano, just like online videos. We did a bit of it in music class, and that kind of was something I got into a bit later. But production, I probably started around 2012. When I was 12 in 2009. So that's when I first downloaded FL Studio. I was in like just entering high school. Like, yeah, just kind of, I'd been listening to a lot of like electronic music on Newgrounds. I don't know if you remember Newgrounds, like this website. No. It's like, there's like games and stuff on there. And then bunch of producers were just uploading their music on there, and you could use it in games. And anyway, it was like a whole community. And then, yeah, around 2011, I discovered like, UKF and also Pendulum. Like I feel like anyone kind of my age around there, like you have to admit like Pendulum was probably a big influence on how you got into drum and bass. Like
it came up so often on this podcast, so often.
Yeah, I think I've listened to it before. Yeah, that's right. And like, yeah, so unashamedly, that's how I got into drum and bass. And then through that, I probably discovered, Liquid, specifically through like UKF, and then they'd upload a few Liquid tunes, and like the earlier Camo and Crooked stuff. It's probably like a good kind of like halfway point for me. Like I really loved their album Cross the Line. I think that was the one that was like 2011, 2012. And then I kind of got into like BC, LSB, like the drum and bass arena compilations introduced me to a much broader variety of drum and bass, the UKF compilations. So yeah, I got exposed to music for a long time, Bachelors of Silence. Bachelors of Silence.
That'd be a good
Bachelors name, of yeah. I should just start a side project just to confuse people. No, Bachelors of Science. Like Strings Track, Song for Lovers, Ice Dance. Like those are some like classics for me. So yeah, that was like around pretty much right up until I finished high school, 2014, and then I kind of just, for some reason, I was just like wanting to explore more genres. Like Flume had become really big here in Australia, and he kind of inspired me to take this other direction, which is really funny because Flume actually listens to a lot of drum and bass. He's very much inspired by UK dance music. So,
is he Australian? I have a feeling.
Yeah, he's from Sydney.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, like the beaches around there, I think. Yeah. So like he kind of inspired me to make more like electronica kind of, I don't know, you could call it indie sort of stuff. Then I eventually got into more hip hop, kind of lo-fi, chill stuff. And then this was like over the space of 5 years. And then I even had a stint there with like house and techno, like kind of deep house stuff. And then, yeah, I think as you grow older, you kind of realize what you like. And then I'm like, I think I just really like drum and bass. And so I eventually just came back to it, and it's been this like full circle moment where I just love it. And that's the music I want to be making. So yeah, that's kind of my musical journey. Yeah.
That's so cool. It's always like, did you have any hesitations? Maybe you were just too young, but like I feel people when they start producing maybe later on in life, it's like, at least it was for my case because I started a lot older, and it's like, okay, I need to like choose this one genre, not only like to get good at it because it takes time, and if you're dabbling in different genres, it's like it takes more time to learn the specific tropes of each genre, but also in terms of consistency for your fan base, like to stick to one genre. I don't know how you felt at that time when you were like switching between genres, if it ever was an issue for you. Or
I mean, there's, to a degree, it's like when you're small enough, you can kind of do whatever you want and not that many people will care. It's like the old thing of like, can't disappoint any fans if you don't have any.
Nobody to disappoint.
And I kind of heard that advice. So I was like, you know what, screw it. Like, people might think this is a bad idea. And I kind of played with having side projects, with not having side projects. So it's, as I said, very scattered. Like I had a duo project in high school as well, where I was like, I was making kind of liquid drum bass under a different alias actually at that time, under an alias called Birthed, which you can find a few of the tracks kind of on YouTube somewhere if you go and Google them.
Ah, nice.
Not very good. And I had another like electro house duo, which was kind of like another musical venture because I was very into that music as well at the time. And yeah, like I kind of experimented with that for a bit, and then I left that once I kind of left high school, and then I then discovered the more like chill stuff. I made some sort of indie stuff, played around with even my vocals, and then really like more of the hip hop rhythm. So yeah, look, I was never really big enough, I guess, and I never really committed to something long enough because Artsea only existed since 2016, I think. And even then, like I didn't get huge in that time. So when I was like, okay, I want to make drum and bass now, and I knew deep down like that was something I was going to commit to. Like previously, it has been kind of like, this is what I'm liking at the moment, but I feel like drum and bass was like the thing that was always waiting for me to return to. It's like I knew I was going to like commit to it, and I'm like, you know what, I've like kind of messed around with a lot of things now. A couple of cool things have happened, but you know, I'm just gonna do it under Artsea because I didn't really want to be bothered starting a new project. I just was like, I've got all the stuff set up, like I've got nothing to lose here, like no one's gonna really be mad. Like I might lose a few fans, like, and I have lost a few fans, to be honest, like when I switched to drum and bass, but it's like, I don't really care. Like, like they can go listen to my old music if they want to.
It's important to do the music that you enjoy first. That's like the most important thing.
Totally. Yeah.
Can you try and like pinpoint what it is about drum and bass that made you like, especially like experimenting with so many different genres? What is it about like drum and bass that like really appeals to you?
Yeah, I think liquid has always been the particular thing I'm drawn to. And obviously I make liquid predominantly. I think I've always been drawn to the more chill, ambient, soulful sounds of any music genre. Not to say I've never made more aggressive styles of music, because I have. But even in hip hop, like it was more the lo-fi, ambient kind of chill stuff. In house, it was the deep, groovy, soulful stuff. Like, and I think one thing that liquid drum and bass had was that. But in terms of specifically drum and bass, like, I think it's just the drum patterns, like the drums being such like a fast element, almost. Sometimes it almost feels fast enough for it to be like just a texture. It's like a texture almost. It's like a nice like pitter. It's like someone described it once as like a pitter patter of drums over like these lush ambient scapes of sound.
What's that? Pitter patter?
Pitter patter. Yeah, it's like when rain's kind of falling on a roof or something that. Yeah. Plus, I think I really appreciate like just the vibe of like those drums kind of pitched, like drum loops pitched up, and it's hard for me to pinpoint, and like the deep sub bass as well, like just kind of, I like deep sounding things, I think, as well. I've realized like I don't like super cheesy bright stuff. Personally,
it has to be mellow.
Yeah. And I think, so that's hopefully that kind of articulates it enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's not obviously it's not an easy question. Like, what appeals to you in an entire genre? It's not easy always to pinpoint it exactly to what it is. I think, for me, it's like the very melodic. Like, I found that liquid drum and bass is one of the only electronic genres that can be very calming but very energetic at the same time, because of the way the drums work. So you can have like a really mellow, melancholic piano over some energetic drums, and it's kind of that duality for me that I haven't found in any other genres. For example, if you listen to techno or house, it's very like in one direction, whereas drum and bass is like these two directions.
Yes, and it was funny because I was submitting a song for like Spotify for artist editorial playlisting the other day, and it's like this option. It says like choose 2 moods for your song. And on that list, it's like chill, blah 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 blah, energetic. And I chose chill and energetic, and I'm like, these guys must be so confused. Like, who chooses chill and energetic at the same time as to describe the mood of the song? I'm like, making liquid drum and bass, man. That's exactly what it is. And then you listen to it, you're like, I get it.
Yeah. They're going to look at it and be like, is this for the gym, or is it for at home with a whiskey? Like, I don't get it. Which one is it for?
and that's what I love about it as well. I think that what you were saying just then is also so true for me. Like, it's something you can equally listen to at home and also listen to like in a club. And I think having that dual purpose is like really nice for me, because it's something it's so personal, but it's also so communal. Like, people can get around it. And I think that's why there's such a strong, both online and in-person community around, drum and bass in general, but also specifically liquid. Like, I feel like there's a nice kind of even sub-niche in that. So, I think that's important for me, is that duality.
No, definitely the little community we have within liquid. I love it. Like, I'm getting quite deep through the podcast and other stuff in that community. It's, I don't know, it's just my kind of people. I really love it.
Exactly. Like, no one's super ego driven. Like, people are just chill. A lot of people have like jobs and stuff like that, and everyone just does it for the love of it, sort of thing. So I
think because it's so niche, like, we all know that there's going to be 1 in a million within liquid that's actually going to make a living out of just like liquid, pretty much. And it's like, we're all aware of that, and so it's like nobody is like ego driven, like you said. I don't
Totally,
know.
yeah. I mean, you don't make liquid to make money, that's for sure.
No, exactly. So it's like,
yeah.
You have to be there just because you enjoy it. That's the only reason.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
That's cool. Just another topic I wanted to ask you. Obviously, if you feel comfortable talking about it, but in those photos, you mentioned a few times about burnout. Once or twice, like burning out quite heavily. I don't know if you just tell me a bit about those experiences, if it was like music related or not, because I think a lot of people might go through similar experiences.
Totally. And honestly, like, this is like one of my biggest weaknesses is my ability to like prioritize things, and when you're kind of on the treadmill of life per se, you can very easily get caught up in what's happening in front of you. And I'm still struggling with this thing, and a lot of the reasons I've had burnout is just not being able to juggle all the things I'm committed to. So like when I was in uni, I would be studying full time. I would be working part time. So I worked at an Apple store for a year and a half while I was in uni, and even though I was part time, a lot of times I'd be working like 5 days a week. And it was a very emotionally draining job. Like I was in like the Genius bar. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Apple store, but that's basically where people come when they're not happy and something's broken. Okay. And then you kind of have to deal with them. And it's like not only fixing their issue, but like, you know, there's emotions that are attached to that.
Being a therapist at the same time.
Yeah. Honestly, it was like a lot of empathy involved with the job, and that's great. And I think it needs to happen, but I'm kind of an introvert, like kind of blur the line between introvert and extrovert, but like I definitely feel like I need time to myself, and it wasn't to be honest, looking back, it wasn't a very suitable job for me. It was very draining, and I was working there a lot and studying business and IT, and I was also trying to do like music, and I had this desire to like make it into a career somehow, and I was engaged, you know, I had a girlfriend, then got engaged, and now married, and like it's just a lot, man. And then all the other little things that happen in life, you know, personal family issues. And basically early 2017, I got to this point where I was just like done. Like I was like, I had to leave my job pretty much. I had to drop back to two part-time uni pretty much, sometimes halfway between. And I think, I guess if like a lot of people, you know, who are pursuing music, the reality is it's tough because you really enjoy it. And even if you're not wanting to specifically make a career out of it, which the more and more I've thought about this is like, you can just do music really well and just enjoy the process rather than having to expect anything specific from happening from it. And I think if I looked back on things now, I would just focus on making the music I wanted to make and not expecting anything to happen. And I think ironically, things would have happened in a completely different way. Not to say I regret the experiences I had, because they informed me of like, you know, things I can do now to combat that. But yeah, I think just like one, not doing too much. Like it's important that you have time, despite the fact that you might have a family or work full time or have a lot of other commitments. It's important to like have a decent amount of time to prioritize towards music if it's important to you. And I think I didn't have that, even though I wanted to. And then when I would work on music, I'd be too exhausted, and it was just this endless cycle. That's kind of why I got burned out, and it happened multiple times. It happened again in late 2018. I kind of was finishing up with uni and really wanted to like try and make music work and somehow make a living off it, but it just wasn't working. And I'd kind of been like, nah, I'm done like expecting anything to happen from music. I'm just going to enjoy it now. And I kind of took a break from it and then realigned. And that, funnily enough, is when I kind of also questioned, you know, what do I want to be making? And then that's kind of where I settled on drum and bass eventually. Burnout's real. In my case, it wasn't like specifically from like doing, it was specifically from expecting too much of myself, I think. And yeah, so yeah, it's real. It can happen even if you're like just like looking at people and what they're achieving, I think that contributes to it. Like you see all your successful friends, or even if it's like, oh, they just released a song or they just did this, and you're like, oh man, I wish I had this song out on this label. like it happens to all of us, even to the most small amount. Like it's a real struggle. So, and that was definitely part of it for me too, is just the comparison thing. So a lot of those things contributed in me being burned out. So
yeah, definitely the music aspect with the pressure of releasing is a topic that comes up quite often. Is like you see music coming out every day, and some artists releasing a lot of music very often, and if you're not quite as productive, or for whatever reason, it can feel like a weight on your shoulders to be making more music and releasing more. And it's not easy to kind of step outside of that and just be comfortable with whatever pace you want to follow in terms of making music and releasing music.
Social media also definitely, it's the amalgamation of everyone delivered to you. Like imagine like a newspaper was delivered on your door, and it's like, here's all the artists that released music today or in the last week. And it's like, if you put it like that, it's like, it is kind of weird. Like you're insane. I mean, we all follow a lot of like our friends who are artists and other artists we admire, and we're seeing literally hundreds of artists at one time doing a lot of different things. And it's like, we're one person, you know, we're not going to be able to keep up with that insane level of output, because it's not actually someone's output. It's actually multiple people's output, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
It's a real struggle though. Yeah.
And I was talking about this with my therapist recently. Like the human brain hasn't evolved to deal with so many like people's lives. Like we used to live in like tribes and have close like relationships, and that was it until the internet, where all of a sudden the rest of the world becomes plugged into your own brain, and your brain just isn't designed to process what everybody else thinks or does or whatever, and that can cause a lot of like anxiety.
Oh, totally, man. I mean, social media specifically is a hard one to balance. Like, to a degree, it's important, and then sometimes I think the importance is overemphasized, and it's like for example, like mental health is far more important than social media. Like, so if that's what you need to prioritize, then you should. And it's a bit of a tough one to balance. Yeah,
definitely. But I like what you said about like you were taking on too many things and learning to prioritize. And something I'm learning is like learning to be okay with times where you're not doing anything. That's also okay. Like you don't have to be doing something productive every minute of your waking life. Like it's okay 100%. To sit down.
Like since I come back on holidays, like, I mean, I think part of to bring up the old COVID again, like everyone's also like hyper eager to do stuff just in life, and whether it's hanging out with people or going to this thing that's now on and stuff like that. Like in between, at least in Australia here, in between these lockdowns where we've actually been able to do stuff, everyone's been wanting to do things. So you kind of like a lot of your nights get taken up, and like life just kind of is like almost feels like catching up for lost time. But at the same time, you have to realize, like, as sucky as it is, you can't live like a year of life in the next 6 months. You know, that it's gone, and you kind of can't put too much pressure on yourself to be doing too much. So I've been trying to be more deliberate with like just being okay to not do anything at night and just kind of chill out sometimes and read a book, you know, or whatever. And like I've been watching the Olympics a lot this last week and a half, which has been really nice, honestly, like coming back and just like having that to like just chill out and do. So 100% it's important.
Just like sit down, and what we've been doing now with my wife is just like putting on a fire and choosing an album that came out recently and just like listening to it and then talking about the album and like not doing anything. Awesome. It's really good. We did it with the recent Billie Eilish just put out an album, so we were like, okay, we're gonna check it out. So we put on a fire, put on the album, and just listen to it and kind of chatted about what it made us feel or what we thought about it. And it's just
That's
like,
so cool.
Yeah, you kind of slow down time. Like you don't have to be super productive all the time. It's a trap I definitely fell into in the past.
Yep.
That's
really cool. Yeah, that's really nice because it's like it's kind of coming back to like how music was originally listened to. Like you didn't do anything while you listened to it. You just listened to it and just appreciated it for what it was. Yeah. So it's really nice that that you do that because it's like you can just focus on that one thing and exactly. It's lovely.
Yeah. And it's something I haven't done for ages. Like I would listen to music on Spotify on my laptop and I'd be doing other stuff at the same time. So like just listening to music is kind of rediscovering what I used to do it when I was like a kid or even a teenager, sometimes when I had CDs and I would put on a CD and just listen to it. But good stuff. I'm talking more about myself here. Sorry.
No. I love it. Like, I totally think, music should be listened to like more, like just kind of as the sole activity you're doing and giving it all your attention. Like, it's what I used to do when I discovered. That's what music discovery is for me. Is like, oh man, this is a cool song that I discovered just by like sifting through. Even if it is online, sometimes at least you're like listening to like this intently for the purpose of listening to music. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm gonna bring this slowly to a close. It's been a absolute pleasure meeting you, chatting with you. Really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Even though the time difference made me wake up earlier than usual, it's fine. No worries, it's fine. Actually, just before we close off and before I ask you to plug anything you want to plug, there's just one thing I wanted to ask you about a track you signed on 174, which absolutely blew my mind, and it's it actually became the email chain we used to set up this chat and everything. The track from Eon called Sanctum. That track just, like, I was talking about tracks that stand out. That track like just blew me away when I heard it. And I started digging about this guy, and he had like one song on Spotify. I was like, the production level was so like out of this world, for at least for me. It was like, who is this guy? How did you land that track? How did that happen?
Totally. No, I mean, so Eon, his name's Daniel. He's from Melbourne, so that's how we discovered him. And like, he's actually a really good producer, and I think he does a really good job of capturing the kind of classic dance floor sound, but having these really nice melodies as well with it. So like, he makes great music. So he's kind of a regular on 174 at the moment. He's kind of a bit busy with life stuff, so he hasn't been like in the studio as much, but he definitely is like he's definitely going to continue to release music with us in the long term. And he's only just getting started, really. Like, he's released two tracks now, I think it is, isn't it? I think he's got Sanctum and Descent, which was on the compilation we released last year. So he's definitely one to watch. He's a very, very talented producer. He's one of these people who's been doing it for a very long time. But at the same time, he very much is a normal guy. He struggles with the same things we all struggle with as producers, to like, do I like this melody enough? Is this song good enough, sort of thing. So he's one to watch.
Was he producing like other genres under other aliases before, or things like that?
No, not that I'm aware of, actually. I don't think so. Like, he's just kind of been one of these people, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with 174. Is there's these producers who kind of are just like dabbling in it, but it doesn't. The reason the UK is such a strong scene for drum and bass is because it's been like that for such a long time, and there's a crew of producers. And I'd argue that's why New Zealand's also kind of had a lot of the success they've had now, is because drum and bass has been the DNA of their music for longer than a lot of other countries, like Australia. Like Pendulum, yes, but like apart from that, and even like what Pendulum doing was kind of, it is drum and bass, but it's like it extenuates beyond drum and bass. So it's they're not really pushing drum and bass as a genre. So I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to organize the producers that are here and kind of encourage them to release music. And that's like, you know, with 174, we're kind of at the moment now, we've released music from people all over the world, but we're exclusively trying to focus on the Australia and New Zealand scene, because there's a lot of producers out here who just haven't been given the opportunity. I mean, and we're still growing as a label. We're still like quite new in the grand scheme of things, but yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to do with 174 is to find these producers who have just been like sitting on their laptop and haven't really had the motivation to like contribute to a scene and stuff like that, because it is still quite small here in Australia. So give them that nudge to actually put out the tracks and finish them. Yeah, totally. And it's a real motivating factor. Like, as much as we all can say, like, just do it for the music, like when there are people around you encouraging you to do it, it makes a big difference, and it makes you want to continue with it. Like, so it's a big part of it.
No, I think it's really cool that you're consciously focusing more on Australian producers, because that can also help if you're putting on events afterwards or things like that, to have like your own producers from your own roster and putting on nights like that. So
totally. And the scene here is still growing. There's other labels, like Shock One started his own label now, and Viper's also, like, in terms of the dance floor side of thing, they've signed a lot of Australian artists now. So the scene is definitely growing here. But yeah, it's just about you know, everyone kind of doing their own part to contribute to the scene, and it'll eventually grow. So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask you about that track, because it's one of the rare tracks when I got the promo by email and I listened to it, and I just put it on repeat and listened to it like 4 or 5 times on repeat when I received it, which like never happens.
So, I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. I'll let him know, because he would be stoked.
No, it's a sick track, and it's obviously it's not liquid, it's more like the dance floor metric style of music, but I'm a huge fan of metric as well, so that kind of music I'm a huge fan, and it was done extremely well. So yeah, really curious what he does going forward.
Awesome.
But no, that was it. Absolute pleasure chatting with you, man. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome, man.
Before we shut off, any upcoming projects you wanna mention, stuff, your music or EDM Prod, whatever that you want to plug here?
I mean, if you're interested in like looking at like tutorials and blog articles and that kind of thing, and checking out the podcast, just head to edmprod.com. Like, that'll point you in all the right directions. In terms of my own music, like, I've got my Differential release coming out tomorrow, so give that your streams, please and thank you. And I've got planned one other single coming out on 174 later in the year, a tune coming out on a compilation we're planning as well later in the year, so stay tuned for that. And you know, as always, trying to line up little things here and there. Future releases, lots of stuff coming out on 174 in general as well, so not just from me. So check out that as well. 174.co, pretty much on all social media. So that's pretty much what's coming up next for me.
Nice. Just don't burn yourself out. That's the only thing.
Yes, I'm gonna do it all at a sustainable pace.
Exactly.
Don't worry, everyone.
Perfect. All right. Well, it was a pleasure, and maybe we can do this again sometime in the future when you have new projects out or whatever.
Would love that, man. Thank you for having me on. It's been so fun.
Yeah, pleasure. Cheers, man.
Thanks, man.